world without boundaries. The Babylonian Empire stood at the crossroads of the cosmos. It was a world without the dichotomy of heaven and hell, where the eternal struggle was not between good and evil, but between the 7 races that inhabited the earth. These races were born from the very essence of the universe, each imbued with powers and curses that shaped their destinies. And in that ancient world, the gods reigned supreme, but their dominion was not uncontested. The land was vast and timeless, stretching from the fertile plains of the Euphrates to the distant mountains where the dragons made their homes. The sky, a deep indigo canvas, held the secrets of creation, while the earth pulsed with the lifeblood of its many inhabitants. Beneath the stars, in the shadows of mighty ziggurats, the ancient races lived, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, locked in a delicate balance that had persisted for millennia. The gods, firstborn of the void. The gods were the first to emerge from the primordial chaos, their forms fused from the very structure of the universe. They were beings of unimaginable power, their bodies woven from the threads of time and space. In their presence, the air shimmered with a strange energy, a reminder of their celestial origins. They were the architects of reality, shaping the world with their will alone. Yet, despite their might, the gods were not invincible. Their power was bound to the very fabric of existence, and any disruption to the cosmic order could weaken them. They were eternal, but not immutable, and their existence was a constant struggle to maintain the delicate balance of creation. The gods were beings of paradox, both creators and destroyers, givers of life and harbingers of death. Their dominion was vast, encompassing the heavens and the earth, but it was not absolute. The gods could not control the will of the other races, and this autonomy bred both respect and resentment. While the humans revered them as protectors, other races, particularly the demons and monsters, saw the gods as tyrants, imposing their will upon a world that was not entirely theirs. The gods were enigmatic and distant, residing in the celestial city of Eridu, where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms blurred. From their thrones, they watched over the world, intervening only when the cosmic balance was threatened. They were as much a part of the world as they were apart from it, beings of both this realm and another, eternal yet ever-changing. Humans, the fragile descendants. Humans, the weakest of the 7 races, were but a glimmer of light in the endless night. They were the descendants of the gods, born from the union of divine and mortal blood, and this lineage granted them a unique place in the world. Unlike the other races, humans were bound by the passage of time, their lives fleeting and fragile, a mere blink in the eye of eternity. Yet it was this very fragility that made humans resilient. Their mortality drove them to create, to build, to strive for greatness in the face of overwhelming odds. They were a race of dreamers and doers, always pushing the boundaries of what was possible, even as they were acutely aware of their limitations. The gods watched over them, offering guidance and protection, but it was up to humans to carve out their own destinies. Despite their weaknesses, humans possessed a strength that was unmatched by any other race, their ability to adapt. While the other races were bound by their nature, humans could change, evolve, and grow. They were not as strong as the giants, nor as cunning as the demons, but they had the capacity to learn, to innovate, and to persevere. It was this adaptability that allowed them to survive in a world filled with beings far more powerful than themselves. But this adaptability came at a cost. Humans were often torn between their divine heritage and their mortal nature, struggling to reconcile the two. This internal conflict manifested in their societies, where the worship of the gods was balanced by a deep-seated fear of the unknown. They were a race caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Giants, the titans of the earth. The giants were a race of titanic beings, towering over 6 meters tall, their bodies forged from the very stone of the earth. They were beings of immense strength and endurance, their muscles rippling with raw power. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and their voices were like thunder, echoing across the mountains and valleys. They were the living embodiment of the earth's might, and their presence inspired both awe and terror. The giants were not just brutes, however. They possessed a deep connection to the earth, a primal understanding of the world that was unmatched by any other race. They could feel the heartbeat of the world, the pulse of life that flowed through the land, and they could shape it to their will. They were the builders of great cities, the architects of wonders that defied the limits of human imagination. But with their strength came a terrible rage. The giants were quick to anger, and when provoked, their fury was like a force of nature, unstoppable and all-consuming. Their strength was both their greatest asset and their greatest weakness, for it often led them into conflicts that could have been avoided. The gods respected the giants for their power, but they also feared their unpredictability. The giants lived in the highlands, where the air was thin and the mountains reached towards the heavens. They were a solitary race, preferring the company of their own kind to the other races. They were bound by a strict code of honor, valuing strength, courage, and loyalty above all else. To betray a giant was to invoke a wrath that could shake the very foundations of the earth. Dragons, lords of the high heavens. High above the world, where the air was thin and the sky burned with the light of distant stars, the dragons reigned supreme. They were the lords of the high heavens, their vast wings spanning the skies as they soared through the clouds. Their scales gleamed like precious metals, and their breath was fire, capable of turning entire cities to ash. The dragons were creatures of majesty and terror, their presence commanding respect and fear in equal measure. Dragons were beings of ancient wisdom, their minds as sharp as their talons. They had witnessed the birth of the world, and they held knowledge that had been forgotten by all other races. They were the keepers of secrets, the guardians of the ancient lore that had been passed down through the ages. To seek the counsel of a dragon was to gain insight into the mysteries of the universe, but it was also to risk incurring their wrath. Despite their power, dragons were not invincible. They were bound by the laws of the world, just like all other races, and they were subject to the same vulnerabilities. Their pride was their greatest weakness, for it often led them to underestimate the other races, particularly the humans. Dragons saw themselves as superior beings, and this arrogance sometimes blinded them to the dangers that lurked in the shadows. The dragons lived in the highest peaks, where the air was thin and the sky was a deep, endless blue. They were a solitary race, preferring to keep their own company, but they would occasionally descend from their lofty homes to interact with the other races. These encounters were often fraught with tension, as the dragon's pride clashed with the ambitions of the other races. Demons, spawn of the abyss. In the dark corners of existence, where the light of the gods could not reach, demons thrived. They were creatures of pure darkness, born from the chaos that existed before the world was formed. The demons were beings of malevolence, their forms twisted and grotesque, reflecting the nightmares of those who beheld them. They were the embodiment of fear, feeding off the terror of the living. Demons were not just mindless beasts, however. They possessed a cunning intellect, a dark intelligence that allowed them to manipulate and deceive the other races. They were masters of illusion, able to warp reality to suit their purposes, and they took great pleasure in sowing discord and chaos. The demons were driven by a deep-seated hatred of the gods, whom they saw as oppressors, and they sought to undermine the divine order at every opportunity. The demons were beings of darkness, and their power was greatest in the shadows. They could move through the darkness as if it were a physical substance, blending into the night and striking without warning. Their presence was often heralded by a sense of unease, a creeping dread that settled over the land like a shroud. The other races feared the demons, but they also respected their power, for they knew that to underestimate a demon was to invite disaster. Demons were solitary by nature, preferring to operate alone or in small groups. They lived in the darkest corners of the world, where the light could not penetrate, and they were constantly scheming, plotting ways to overthrow the gods and seize control of the world. The demons were patient, knowing that their time would come, and they were willing to wait for the right moment to strike. Monsters, spawn of chaos. In the wild places of the world, where the laws of men and gods had no influence, monsters roamed. They were creatures born from the chaos of creation, their forms twisted and grotesque, reflecting the primal forces that had shaped them. The monsters were beings of pure instinct, driven by a need to survive in a world that was often hostile and unforgiving. Monsters were not intelligent in the same way as the other races, but they possessed a primal cunning, a deep understanding of the natural world that allowed them to thrive where others would perish. They were beings of raw power, their bodies adapted to their environments, whether it was the deep oceans, the dense forests, or the arid deserts. Monsters were survivors, and they would do whatever it took to stay alive. Despite their lack of intelligence, monsters were not to be underestimated. They were often larger and stronger than the other races, and their sheer physical power made them formidable opponents. The gods had little control over the monsters, and this made them a constant threat to the divine order. The other races viewed monsters with a mixture of fear and respect, knowing that even the mightiest among them could fall to the teeth and claws of a beast. Monsters were solitary by nature, preferring to live alone in the wilderness, away from the other races. They were territorial creatures, fiercely defending their homes from intruders. The monsters were as much a part of the world as the mountains and rivers, and they were as ancient as the earth itself. They were the remnants of a time before the world was tamed, a reminder of the wild, untamed forces that had shaped the earth. Witches, keepers of the dark arts. In the shady groves and hidden valleys of the world, where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, witches practiced their dark arts. They were beings of great power, their knowledge of magic unmatched by any other race. The witches were the keepers of ancient secrets, their spells woven from the very fabric of reality. They were both feared and revered, their power both a blessing and a curse. Witches were not born, but made. They were once human, but their pursuit of forbidden knowledge had transformed them into something more. They had tapped into the primal forces of the universe, and in doing so, they had gained power beyond mortal comprehension. But this power came at a cost, for the witches were forever bound to the dark forces they had invoked, their souls tainted by the magic they wielded. Despite their dark nature, witches were not inherently evil. They were beings of great wisdom, and they often used their powers to protect the world from the threats that lurked in the shadows. But their methods were often harsh, and their actions were guided by a logic that was alien to the other races. The witches did not see the world in terms of good and evil, but in terms of balance and chaos. The witches lived in isolation, far from the prying eyes of the other races. They preferred the company of their own kind, and they rarely ventured into the cities of men. But when they did, their presence was often a sign of great upheaval, for the witches only intervened in the affairs of the world when the balance was threatened. They were the guardians of the ancient ways, and their power was both feared and respected. In this world of 7 races, the Babylonian Empire stood as a testament to the delicate balance that had been maintained for millennia. The gods ruled from their celestial thrones, but their power was not absolute, and the other races constantly challenged their dominion. The humans, weak but adaptable, struggled to find their place in a world filled with beings far more powerful than themselves. The giants, dragons, demons, monsters, and witches all played their part in the grand cosmic dance, each contributing to the eternal struggle for control over the earth.